Good morning. Going to be going over the orderIT system for December the 23rd, 2020. We've had 13 trades for that day, 8 were buys and 5 were short sells. The first trade is FUV. That is Archimoto Incorporated. It tripped at 12:05:01 p.m. at a price of $15.13. At a price of $15.13. It was a buy. It closed the day at $14.35 and was actually down 4.33%, so obviously it's a close. Let's see if there's any possibility of it coming out. Doesn't move, so I think it's going to find a way around this period of time. 15.13, yeah. No, it did not come up above its tripping price, and the stock was down, so not a good start. OBV shows that it was up for most of the day, then dropped in the afternoon. Late afternoon it dropped. MACD up in the morning, up in the afternoon a bit, but you can see it's down a good portion on day 2. Excuse me. DI again showing up in the morning, down up a little bit. Then I'm going to consider that a negative, just because indicators are not showing any strong movement in positive direction, even though the stock itself is down. Well, not that the stock was down. Stock was down, and the indicator shows that it was continuing to move down. There was no strong point. It just happened to trip. These are probably good points of evaluation to determine the strategy to take into strategy stocks that are tripping, obviously, when they're down, to see what is the absolute necessary criteria to actually include them, because there could be things that can be optimized a bit more. Next trade is CMCSA. That's Comcast Corporation. Tripped at 12:25:02 p.m. at a price of $49.68. It was a short sale, and it closed 50.03. It was actually up 4.03%. Yeah, see, look. It tripped right here when it was coming down and just increased. So that looks like another invalid day. That stock happened to be recovering after its drop in the morning. OBV showing recovering, and it was dropping again in the afternoon volume-wise. And MACD showed the same thing. It was down early morning, it tripped here at the end, and you can see this big jump it had in the early afternoon, but then continually dropped for the rest of the day. It did make a recovery at the end of the day. DI is showing almost half and half, but again, that strong recovery. And that Bollinger Band showing the same thing. It had a strong recovery. If it wasn't for this strong recovery, the stock probably would have been a downtrend, but it just never went in that direction. So that's another trade that's not possible. Next trade is AAU. That's Almaden Minerals Limited. Tripped at 12:35:13 at a price of 51 cents. It is a buy trade. It closed the day at 51 cents, up 4.92%, so it actually tripped okay. Just happened to close at its tripping price. Let's see, 12.35. So around this, so tripped down here, 51.50 up there, 51.49, 51.49, 51.94, 51.51. Yeah. I'm going to say it's a positive, but that's a very, very tricky positive. There's a good almost an hour of time where it was above its tripping price. It's a penny stock, so the aspect of just seeing it rising by a fraction of a cent, that's normal for penny stocks. The potential is still there, even if it's only rising for a penny, or excuse me, a fraction of a penny. The indicators. Indicators OBV showing that it rises and then drops. So basically a V or triangle style there. MACD showing the same thing. It rises down and it was rising again in the afternoon. DI showing the same thing. It was up for the most part morning, early morning, or morning to late morning, I should say. Well, late morning, early afternoon it was up, and then late afternoon that's where that drop occurred. But again, you can see it was making a recovery. Northern Japan showing the same thing. So I think that in general was a positive moving stock. It just happened to be it didn't obviously move up heavily price-wise. It was actually up a good percentage. Next trade is CETX. It's Centrex. It tripped at 12:19 p.m. at a price of 163. It was a buy. It closed the day at 162, but it was up 10.96%. So we'll see 1250, so roughly around this time. So you can see look up to here at 186. So it actually, 166, it came up a good amount, up a good 15-20 minutes here. Came down, okay, it dropped. 162, and then you can see that. Okay, so there's two periods, almost close to an hour of time where it was up above its tripping price, and you can see the end of day, it was recovering. And interesting, the closing is showing 162, but the end of the day is actually showing a positive. I consider that a positive because there were times, multiple times during the day where it was above its tripping price. Excuse me. OBV is showing a very steady upwards rise. MACD up late morning and mid-afternoon and then down. MACD is showing basically bouncing back and forth. DI showing the same thing. It was making a recovery in the day, and Bollinger Band, you can see that bouncing back and forth, almost moving sideways. But in the end result, there was a couple of points where it was positive. The stock does look like it's moving positive, even though the indicators are not showing that heavily. But it does look overall, price-wise, it does look like it was moving in a somewhat positive direction. Next trade is KPTI. That's Karyopharm Therapeutics Incorporated. It tripped at 1:10:54 p.m. at a price of $16.44. It was a short sell. It ended the day at $16.44. It was down 3.92%. 110. Let's see. It looks like there. 110. 16.43. So down a little bit there. 16.49. 16.40. 37. Okay. At almost half an hour of time at the end of the day, but you could see there was periods of time where it was moving down near its tripping price. But again, there was a couple of points at the end of the day, almost half an hour, where there was a point where the exit could have been done, making a profit. In general, price-wise, you can see the stock was moving down. We'll see if the indicators are showing that same kind of movement. OBV bouncing back and forth. MACD. MACD is actually showing sideways in the afternoon for the most part. Early afternoon moved up and then dropped. So MACD is showing as much, if not more, a little bit more negative, positive than negative. DI though is showing a good portion of the day, so DI is showing most of the day. DI directional index wise was moving negative. And you see the Bollinger Band is basically showing somewhat of a steady decline. So I consider that a positive trade or a positive stock because of that. It's moving downward just from the visualization, and for the most part, indicators do show that somewhat downward direction. Next trade is FCEL. Next trade is FCEL, that's Fuel Cell Energy Incorporated. It tripped at 1:15 at 2 p.m. at a price of $13.63. It was a buy. It closed the day at $13.42, but you can see that it's dropping. It increased 24 to almost 25%, so it had a good increase, but it looks like it's starting to reverse a bit early morning. Early morning is always, not to say that's the way the stock is going. It just shows that some activity is happening in the stock. And again, with market manipulation, there could be the aspect of some people trying to drive the price down is working early morning, which happens quite a bit in stock activity. The market manipulators are starting their daily activity. OBV showing somewhat of a steady increase. MACD is as much down as it was up. So MACD is not strongly positive. There were points that were positive, but not strongly. You can see that it actually had a big drop in the early afternoon. DI though was showing a good portion of the day it was moving positive. So the MACD a little bit positive, and DI heavily positive. And Bollinger Band showing a somewhat steady increase. So I think the end result of that stock was positive. And then it closed obviously above its triple price. Next trade is DQ. Excuse me again. That's DACO New Energy Corporation. They tripped at 1:25 at 3 p.m. at a price of $60.38. It was a short sell. They closed the day at $58.39, down 9.88%. So that's another positive trade. Positive in the aspect that you can make money on it. It was moving down, obviously. See if the indicators are going to be confirming that. Yes, look, OBV just dropping. MACD, it had an increase in the morning, but dropped for the rest of the day. So morning it was up, and then the rest of the day it was down. And DI showing the same thing, up a little bit in the morning, and the rest of the day, and at the end of the day it was moving very heavily negative. So that stock looks to be strongly negative. Bollinger Band showing a steady decline, so that stock definitely moving down. Next trade is BNGO, Bionano Genomics Incorporated. It tripped at 1:40 at 3 p.m. at a price of 77 cents. It was a buy. It closed the day at 77.50, up 40.4%. So as you can see, it had a huge increase, and again, you can see activity early morning is pushing it down a bit, but obviously it increased quite a bit. So that's another positive stock. Let's see if the indicators are showing that same kind of movement. OBV showing it's pretty much moving up and then moving sideways at the end of the day. Interestingly enough, while OBV was showing a somewhat steady increase, volume-wise, MACD's averages were coming down. And actually, MACD is showing that the stock was moving downwards for most of the day. DI though is showing that it actually was moving positive. So directional index is showing that it was moving in a positive direction for a good portion of the day, even though at the end of the day it looked like it was moving down, or end of the day close period it was starting to come down. But again, you can see Bollinger Band showing that it's somewhat not concrete. It was moving upwards, and in the day just moving sideways. So all this up and down movement is basically just sideways activity. But the end result is the stock ended the day up above its triple price. Next trade is DISH, I assume it's Dish Network Corporation. It tripped at 1:40 at 5 p.m. at a price of $39. Buy trade. Closed the day at 30.97, up 7.24%, so it's another positive trade. Let's see what the indicators are showing. OBV somewhat moving upwards. You can see some bouncing back and forth, but moving upwards. You can see the end of the day is moving upwards. MACD showing somewhat of a morning, early afternoon, morning to mid-afternoon of moving upwards and then coming down a bit in late afternoon. DI showing the same thing. It pretty much paused until the afternoon and started moving downwards. Bollinger Band showing that it actually was just moving sideways. So it made its made its profit and then just started moving sideways. So it wasn't able to maintain its rise, but it didn't close anything either. DHR, Danaher Corporation, tripped at 2:20:05 p.m. at a price of tripped at 2:20:05 p.m. Just look at the price and the time's almost the same. The price was 222.50. It was a short sell. It closed the day at 220.57, down 1.16%. So that actually is another positive trade as it ended the day below its stripping price for short sales. That's positive. OBV, you see the end of the day is where it was coming down volume-wise. MACD, same thing. Morning was up a little bit and then down for the rest of the day. DI showing the same thing, up a little bit in the morning and coming down for the rest of the day and heavily down at the end of the day. And that's Bollinger Band showing the same thing. So basically at the end of the day it just started dropping. CSX, excuse me. CSX Corporation, it tripped at 2:25:20 p.m. at a price of 89.52. It was a short sell. It closed the day at 89.67, actually up 0.13%. So 225, around this time, roughly 89.56, 89.52 down there. So about 5-10 minutes there. 89.57. Yeah, not a strong movement positive-wise. So check to see if the indicators are showing anything. Is the stock upward? Stock is not moving along. And sideways, it peaked up and then dropped. MACD showing the same thing. It pretty much was moving up in the afternoon, dropped a little bit at the end of the day, but again, not negative for the most part, positive on general. DI showing, actually, the afternoon was negative, positive the rest of the time, so up and down. I'm going to consider that a positive call, but a little bit iffy on the side part. It's not concrete, but I say it's more possible than a negative. Next trade is MRO, Marathon Oil Corporation. It tripped at 2:45:01 p.m. at a price of 6.86. It was a buy trade. It closed the day at 6.81, and it was up 7.92%. So at least that's a good thing. It was up 245. No, I didn't. Okay, oh no, here's. Okay, no, it was up here a good portion of time. It came down. So right after it tripped, it stayed up at 689. I'm talking almost 10-15 minutes. 686. 686. I'm going to say they're positive, but they're very, very light possible. Excuse me, positive. Very light positive. There's a good maybe 15 minutes of time there. They're consistent. It wasn't jumping up and down. It was basically consistently up above its trading price for a good 10 to 15 minutes. OBV showing it was moving somewhat positive. It did drop at the end of the day, it looks like, volume-wise. MACD showing it was up, dropped, so the afternoon it was dropping. DI though showing that it was pretty much positive for most of the day, and at the end of the day you can see it basically coming down. Bollinger Band showing that it was rising until the afternoon, and for the most part moving sideways, but you can see a little bit of a drop though in the afternoon. But again, this stock was moving positive. Next trade is JAGX. That's Jaguar Health Incorporated. We tripped at 3 p.m. at a price of 112. It was a buy. Oh my god. Oh, okay. Whew. It closed at 107. But closed at 107, but you can see the stock up 170.34%. It did drop though 25%, so it did come down. But again, it was heavily up overall, so this stock did have opportunity, obviously, upwards. You see at 3 p.m., so roughly around that time, 113, get that 112.9, actually 1 to 117. There's a couple of periods now, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, but I'll consider the pause just because it was there. It's hard to say if it's a possible trade if it wasn't positive at any point in time, because of the fact it did lose a good portion of its value, even though it massive increase the previous day. So it is moving strongly the day it was trading, and the next day it did drop. OBV, yeah, let's see, MACD, it went up and then came down and moved sideways. Volume, the DI showing somewhat positive for a good portion of the day, but it had those points within the day. And Bollinger Band basically showing the fact that it was technically moving sideways. So it actually opened up positive, but it didn't continue its positive movement. So it opened up positive and just maintained that. So we're talking something that came up. It had a bit of a rise early morning. See. 76. Pretty much lost its day activity for that day, but it's still previous close, so still up a lot. Anyways, that's the trades for that day. I think it was still a good day, and I actually didn't do the actual time average. That's 10 out of 13. I consider positive, and that's 76.9%. So yes, a good day. I'll leave that. Thank you very much.